There are great players, and then there are matchups that feel bigger than the sport itself. Women's basketball has searched for its defining rivalry for years, something with the electricity of Magic versus Bird, the cultural weight of Ali versus Frazier, the sustained brilliance of LeBron versus Curry. On a warm Saturday afternoon in Indianapolis last week, the sport found its answer, and it arrived with a thunderclap. Paige Bueckers, Caitlin Clark. A 107-104 thriller that left the basketball world breathless and the television ratings departments stunned. This is no longer a rivalry in waiting. It has arrived, and it is just getting started. When the Dallas Wings and Indiana Fever tipped off on May 9, 2026, at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, the stakes were already extraordinary. The game brought together the last 4 #1 picks in WNBA draft history on a single floor: Aaliyah Boston, 2023, and Caitlin Clark, 2024 for Indiana, and Paige Bueckers, 2025, and Azzi Fudd, 2026 for Dallas. It was in many ways the most talent-rich opening weekend matchup in league history. But beyond the draft pedigree, it was the Clark-Bueckers dynamic that had the world watching. Clark, playing her first regular season game since July 2025 after an injury-plagued sophomore campaign, finished with 20 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds, and also became the fastest player to reach 1,000 career WNBA points. Bueckers, arriving off a stunning rookie season in which she averaged 19.2 points, 5.4 assists, and 1.6 steals, while tying the single-game rookie scoring record with 44 points, matched Clark's 20-point total with what analysts described as a more seamless and efficient performance. The Wings edged the Fever 107-104 in a contest that delivered everything fans had hoped for: pace, skill, drama, and a final scoreline that refused to separate the two teams by more than a possession. It was the first season opener in WNBA history in which both teams scored more than 100 points. As statements of intent go, it could scarcely have been louder. If the game itself was extraordinary, the audience it attracted confirmed something that league executives have been quietly hoping would materialize. The Clark-Bueckers matchup is a television event. The May 9 clash averaged 2.49 million viewers on ABC, making it the second most watched regular season game in WNBA history on ABC or ESPN. It ranked as the 14th most viewed sports event of the entire week across all American television, with the only programs ranked higher being NBA playoff games. For a regular season women's basketball game to sit comfortably in that company is not just remarkable, it is transformative. The numbers do not exist in a vacuum. Clark had already demonstrated in the preseason that her return from injury would reignite public interest. Her first WNBA action since the previous July, a preseason game against the New York Liberty, averaged 743,000 viewers on ION, the most watched preseason game in that network's history, and a 76% increase over the previous year's equivalent fixture. When Clark and Bueckers share a floor, the viewing public responds in a way the sport has rarely, if ever, experienced. Overall WNBA viewership across all ESPN platforms is up 7% on last season, and the season has barely begun. The trajectory is unmistakable. To understand why this matchup resonates so deeply, it is necessary to appreciate that the Clark-Bueckers story did not begin in the WNBA. It did not begin on national television. It began in the trenches of college basketball, long before sold-out arenas and primetime broadcasts became routine for women's sport. Their rivalry first captured the imagination in the 2021 NCAA Tournament Sweet 16, when Bueckers, then a freshman phenomenon at UConn, led the Huskies to a dominant 92-72 victory over Clark and the Iowa Hawkeyes. Bueckers controlled the game with her characteristic poise and maturity, finishing with 18 points, 9 rebounds, and 8 assists. Clark, even in defeat, flashed the long-range brilliance that would define her career, scoring 21 points with 5 three-pointers. Basketball observers watching that day felt they had glimpsed something important about the future. 3 years later, the rivalry delivered its most dramatic chapter. In the 2024 Final Four, one of the most watched women's basketball games in history, Clark and Iowa extracted their revenge, edging past UConn 71-69 in a game of extraordinary tension. The story had come full circle, and both players had grown enormously in stature. The debate about which of them was the better player, the bigger star, the more significant figure for the sport had become a permanent fixture of basketball discourse. That debate has now followed them to the professional stage, and it shows no sign of abating. One reason this rivalry commands such fascination is that Clark and Bueckers are not mirror images of each other. They are distinct players with contrasting approaches to the game, and those differences make their head-to-head encounters genuinely compelling from a tactical standpoint. Clark is the long-range artist, the player who can alter a game's momentum with a single deep three-pointer, and whose court vision and playmaking have drawn comparisons to the most creative guards in basketball history. Her game is built on pace, audacity, and a fearlessness that borders on the theatrical. She takes risks, sometimes to her own detriment, as evidenced by 5 turnovers in the May 9th opener, 2 of which were offensive fouls. But those risks are inseparable from what makes her thrilling to watch. Bueckers is a different kind of genius. Where Clark can be volatile and electric, Bueckers possesses an almost unnerving composure. She finds gaps that other players cannot see, converts in traffic, and manages games with a quiet authority that belies her age. In the May 9th opener, observers noted that despite matching Clark's point total exactly, Bueckers' performance felt measurably more efficient. Her movement to spots was described as seamless, her ball security impeccable. She also spent significant portions of the game defending Clark directly, and acquitted herself admirably in that role. 2 players, 2 styles, each capable of winning a game single-handedly. That is the foundation of a great rivalry, and both of them are still 24 years old. Beyond the on-court theatre, the Clark-Bueckers rivalry has taken on an interesting professional dimension that adds further texture to proceedings. In the WNBA's annual General Manager survey conducted ahead of the 2026 season, executives were asked which player they would select to build a franchise around. The results made headlines. Bueckers claimed 33% of the vote, while Clark received 20%, a dramatic reversal from the previous year's survey, in which Clark had earned 50% support following her historic rookie campaign. The shift reflected, at least in part, the perception that Clark's injury-affected 2025 season had clouded her standing in professional circles, while Bueckers' rookie year had elevated her dramatically. Clark, for her part, has made no secret of her desire to prove those assessments premature. "Hopefully a championship," she said when asked about her expectations for the 2026 season. "I feel like we have all the pieces put together now. The chip on her shoulder is visible, and it is motivating." Bueckers, characteristically, responded to the poll results with grace rather than bravado. "There are so many amazing basketball players to choose from," she said. "For them to think that highly of me, I'm very grateful, very blessed." It is a response that speaks to the personality differences between the 2 rivals. Clark, the bold and demonstrative competitor. Bueckers, the composed and quietly confident one. Both approaches work. Both are compelling. The contrast between them makes the rivalry richer. The timing of this rivalry's emergence matters enormously. The WNBA spent decades being dismissed, undervalued, and commercially marginalized. The arrival of Clark in 2024 changed the conversation in a way that was sudden, dramatic, and unprecedented. Attendance records fell, television audiences swelled, and women's basketball began receiving the kind of mainstream coverage that had previously been denied to it. Bueckers' arrival in 2025 added a second pole to that tent. The league now has 2 players, young, brilliant, contrasting, and already familiar to an audience that followed them through college, who can sustain interest across an entire season and beyond. Together, they offer something that individual stars, however talented, cannot provide alone: the promise of recurring confrontation, the expectation of a rematch, the certainty that the story is not yet finished. The historical parallels are instructive. The NBA's rise to cultural dominance in the 1980s was driven significantly by the rivalry between Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, 2 players who had faced each other in the NCAA championship game and then proceeded to define a professional era together. The WNBA, standing at a pivotal moment in its own history, now has something structurally similar. 2 players whose story began before either turned professional and whose careers now appear destined to intersect at every major junction. As one widely cited analysis noted this week, if Clark and Bueckers remain healthy, the WNBA could spend the next decade building around their matchups the same way other leagues once built around those historic rivalries. That is not hyperbole. That is an honest assessment of what the sport now possesses. The most remarkable aspect of the Clark-Bueckers rivalry in May 2026 is that for all its history and intensity, it remains genuinely young. Both players are 24 years old. Neither has won a WNBA championship. Neither has claimed a league MVP award. The chapter's already written. The college battles, the cultural phenomenon of Clark's rookie season, Bueckers' extraordinary debut campaign, their first WNBA regular season clash, constitute only the opening pages of a much longer book. There will be playoff confrontations, all-star games, and individual accolades that shift the balance of the debate. There will be injuries and comebacks, poor shooting nights, and performances that redefine what is possible. There will be games watched by millions that are decided in the final seconds, and the argument over who is truly the greater player will probably never be definitively resolved. That is precisely the point. The greatest rivalries are never truly settled. They endure because neither side will accept permanent inferiority, because every new encounter reopens a question the previous one appeared to close, and because the two people at the center of it bring out something in each other that neither could access alone. Bueckers said it herself. The greatest way to show respect is to compete and really bring the best out of each other. In that regard, at least, there is no disagreement between them. Women's basketball asked for a rivalry worthy of the sport's growing stature. It has its answer. The Indiana Fever next face the Dallas Wings later this season. Given what we have already witnessed, expect the entire basketball world to be watching.